Her days were filled with the task of cleaning up the celebrations of others, but she had never anticipated becoming the focal point of a party. It was to be a night filled with joy and the sharing of gifts, but a poor black maid stood in the house aglow with Christmas lights, until one moment of humiliation brought the room to a standstill. Laughter turned cold, and the presence of kindness vanished, prying open a scar left from a bout of racism in front of the wealthy and well-powerful. Nothing was said, and nobody budged. The heavyweight businessman finally took notice of what nobody else had bothered to observe. Before that night, her life had run on a quiet and exhausted cycle that no one ever noticed. She woke before the sun rose, took bus rides across town that lasted for what felt like hours, and cleaned houses that looked nothing like her own. She was just a poor black maid, after all. She had learned to be invisible, to move silently, talk little, and work harder than anyone expected. To survive this way was to know that dignity was often found in endurance. For years, she had been working within the walls of the Millionaire's mansion. She waxed the marble floors, trimmed the gigantic Christmas trees, and set up homes for the celebrations that she indirectly attended but never really belonged to. This employment was barely enough for her, but at least it was regular, and that counted for much. She was bringing up her children on her own, small faces that eagerly awaited the food, the warmth, and the better tomorrow that tomorrow promised, and that today was lacking. Christmas party, she thought. It was going to be just another day of work, of longer shifts, fuller trays, brighter smiles. The house was filled with rich guests, glinting decorations, and music which resonated in corridors she normally swept to empty halls. She moved quietly into the background, where she normally moved, being very careful to stay unnoticed, to make no errors. It was not her territory, she well knew. However, beneath all this glamour and laughter, something uneasy lurked. The looks lingered a moment longer. The whispers stung a bit sharper. The imbalance of power swirled in the air, a precarious and unchallenged tension. And though she did not yet realize this night would prove much more than a trial for her temper. It would reveal a cruelty that had been her constant companion all her life and put her right in the middle of a situation that no one in that manner could afford to forget. But as the night progressed, the mansion became louder, brighter, and more reckless. The poor black maid pushed her way through the crowd with the practiced ease of one who knew how to keep herself invisible while refilling glasses and balancing trays. She knew how easily attention could turn to criticism. A single misstep would do it. The initial movement in the air was quiet. A drink spilled on the edge of the room, not as a result of her hands, as a person bumped into her in a haste to reach somewhere. Yet, all eyes remained on her. The pause that ensued seemed heavy, like it was not meant to happen. She squatted to clean the drink, her hands shaking as if they had known what was about to happen. That is when the whispers began, whispers that began softly and then turned harsh with a hint of amusement. The millionaire's fiancé remained close by, dressed in finery that required compliance. Her gaze focused on the maid, and it was as if ice had been set to marble against her flesh. The room narrowed to a point where laughter ceased, and a collective hold of breath and expectation fell still. Power exercised itself with the speed of a blade across flesh, and the maid felt its weight bearing down on her. What came next was not very loud, but it was brutal. The humiliation was slow, deliberate, and for effect. Each word, each action tore down the maid's dignity, years of hard work reduced to one moment of public embarrassment. Their presence was not enough to help, their silence louder than any words of put down. Some turned away, uneasy but relieved it wasn't them, while others watched, some in fascination, with the disparity of power being dangled before them like a puppet show. The maid stood rigid, her face aflame, her mind careering between fright and survival. Then she thought of her children. Then she thought of the long bus rides home. Then she thought of how easily this job could vanish if she responded incorrectly. Her fingers trembled, but she did not move. The lessons of all those years of survival had shown her that resisting often involved a price tag she could ill afford. The shame was compounded. A matter that should have remained between herself and the offender was now a public spectacle. The affluence surrounding her rendered everyone else immune to the consequences of their actions, while she was left susceptible to the discomfort that threatened to engulf her. The Christmas lights twinkling above her compelled her to acknowledgement of the cruel truth that surrounded her. And then something changed. In the same room, the millionaire was standing completely motionless. He hadn't listened to all, but he had seen enough. The positions of the guests, the positions of the maid, the intervals at which the laughter was stifled. His face set in a harder line as he took in the details that others chose to ignore. Soft fists, downcast eyes, a disequilibrium that was all too familiar to dismiss as mere imagination. The room held its breath, oblivious to the line being crossed. The maid expected the moment to play out as all the ones in her life had, with silence, with shame, and the implicit expectation of suffering in quiet. But the tension did not erupt. It condensed. Every passing moment lasted longer than the last as the millionaire took a step forward. But in that moment, it remained unknown how the night would lay a final end to her dignity, or reveal the reality that could shake the whole assembly. The second dragged out interminably. The room that had pulsed so livingly to music and laughter was now muffled and silent as the millionaire made his appearance. The significance of every movement was magnified now. The guests were aware of it. The fiancé was aware of it too. And the maid, caught in the midst of this undignified spectacle, could feel her blood racing as if something irrevocable was about to take place. This was where everything could fall apart for her. One mistaken assumption, one silent choice between status and truth. She had witnessed enough cases where power preferred comfort over justice. Her face remained frozen, but her soul sensed its grip on her tightening with fear. If the onus remained on her, she would not only be losing a job, she would be losing dignity, security, and stability that she had struggled for all her life. The millionaire's focus shifted from the polished faces of his guests to the woman that each and every one of them had already judged. He took in the contrast, the wealth circling around him, the silence that was a buffer for cruelty, and the exhaustion that was imprinted on the maid's body. This was no misunderstanding, no mistake that could possibly be righted or rectified. This was humiliation masquerading as authority. "It's going to be a mess," she repeated, but no one heard her. The fiancé's confidence was beginning to fracture as people began to turn their gaze away from the maid and towards her. It was a shift in energy. A moment before, this information had seemed inviolable, but now it was vulnerable. All of a sudden, what had been a party was no longer a celebration, but a reckoning. For the first time that evening, the maid felt something new rise inside her. Not anger, nor defiance, but the tenuous possibility of something different. For the first time that evening, she was not invisible at all. She was visible enough that someone recognized the injustice for what it was. She was visible enough that someone who could alter the course of the story noticed her. She was visible enough that someone who was meant to change the course of the universe. The room waited with bated breath. It was a point at which silence could once again shield racism or shatter it all before the eyes of all of us assembled. The night did not end the way that it had begun. The shame had been stopped, not with shouting and spectacle, but with clarity and consequence. The maid was no longer just a darkness in the room. What had been done to her had been brought into the light in the presence of all those who had been silent a moment before. Finally, the balance of power for a moment had turned away from cruelty. The house left her changed. The fear that had constricted her chest throughout the night gave way to a softer emotion, relief and disbelief. The job she thought she was going to lose became a microcosm for what she was trying to prove, that the measure of her dignity was not up to others. The gift she received was more than just cash, more than just the safety it provided. It was the acceptance. It was the experience of being viewed as fully human in a room that had attempted to reduce her to something smaller. However, the effect did not end there either. The guests took this moment back home with them, whether they liked it or not. What had ostensibly been a joyous occasion to applaud generosity had instead laid bare how easily racism could cloak itself in wealth, in politeness, and in tradition. This is a common story. It is a reflection of a life that has been led silently by countless people who have feared to speak out because they knew that if they did so, they would lose everything. This story poses a very difficult question regarding the spaces that we inhabit and the events that we bear witness to. When we observe injustice occurring in our presence, do we turn away or do we step out? Because change, real change, doesn't start with speeches like this. It happens in moments like this when an individual realizes that dignity is more precious than status, when an individual realizes that silence is no longer an option. The question is, what will you do when you witness an instance like this in the future?